there's a life cycle to getting this in place. These are 8 steps that generally people think about. You'll think about a strategy. You'll do a discovery to figure out where your cryptography is if you haven't already inventoried certain aspects of it, and then you'll understand who within your ecosystem can help you upgrade those systems, or who will be providing patches for those systems, or which code projects do you need to kick off to make sure they're implemented in code that you design. You want to make sure that you think about your entire architecture and how to mitigate safely. There'll be defense and depth layers as well, where you'll have controls at the network layer, at the application layers, or at other infrastructure layers in order to protect your highest value assets. You'll run tests, you'll run trials, you'll roll it out eventually, and then you'll need to manage this as a new service across your security landscape. And so this is kind of the 2 to 5 year journey that most businesses will go through as they're adopting this technology.
Carl, we did have
Yeah.
a clarifying question, I think, in the
Oh,
chat.
sure.
They were just kind of asking, when will this technology be available to attackers? We assume that it's going to be harder for them to potentially have it because quantum computing takes so many resources. Or does it even matter? Does it just that when the technology exists, we're all vulnerable and we have to deal with it? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so it's a good question. The answer is somewhat difficult to say. So we don't know the exact time that a quantum computer will exist that can break this cryptography. There are, like I mentioned, some estimates of the years that it will be available. How tightly will that be protected? How tightly will that be sanctioned? How, already we're seeing countries put in place export restrictions around even the components to be able to build the quantum computer, right? So at a certain level, you could say, not an average hacker is just going to have access to it necessarily. However, depending on the modality of the quantum computer that's created and the availability of recreation of that system, will it spread as quickly as, Gen AI did, where, in just a few months, everyone had it at their fingertips? Hard to say. I don't know. I don't know if it'll roll out that way. But what we do know is that the people who are investing very heavily into this is nation states, right? And so as far as that playing field goes, we suspect that the arms race for building this technology has been going on for a long time, and yeah, there's billions and billions invested in different adversaries at that level in order to gain this. So there may not be too big a large disparity between when it becomes available at that scale.
That's great. Thank you, Carl.
Yep. Okay. So again, I mentioned these 2 types of attacks. This is important to think about as you're designing your journey as to how you protect your systems. On the left, we have the ability to steal and copy data, store it off, and then decrypt it later. So any data that has a specific data retention requirements, you maybe have to keep it around for a while, or data that has uh, key secrets that you want to protect for a long period of time. Those types of information, if you haven't already classified or you don't know where it is, you'll need to take additional care as to where it's going, how it's being transmitted, who's using it, and make sure that you're aware of the channels that it's using to navigate through your network so that it can be protected against this threat. And then this threat of impersonation, or being able to generate a key on the fly and act as someone else, is incredibly disruptive, and we'll have to prepare for that too. But that is only going to manifest itself in a real way when that quantum computer exists to be able to produce those keys in more of a real-time fashion. So there are multiple ways to reduce the risk, mitigate the risk, or effectively dissolve the risk of these attacks. We're going to talk about the middle one today, post-quantum cryptography, but you should be aware that there are, if you're not using asymmetric cryptography. If you're using symmetric cryptography and you're using pre-shared keys, then the AES algorithms or those algorithms are mitigation. They're not vulnerable or they're not weak. However, they don't scale in the same way that our asymmetric algorithms scale, as far as our ability to use them to communicate with millions or trillions of devices, or even it can be difficult to do tens of thousands of devices with pre-shared keys, depending on who you have staffed or how you have that particular infrastructure or network deployed. And so the the approach that and the new algorithms that NIST published are for the second category of post-quantum cryptography algorithms, or PQC as it's commonly known. And these are the new asymmetric algorithms that we mentioned earlier. Then also you have quantum key distribution. This is what I was mentioning earlier, this physics-based approach to secure sending and exchanging key information, which you can then use to derive keys, which acts very similar to the number one, the pre-shared key approach, where you're communicating keys over a very protected and secure channel and then deriving symmetric keys for your communication. But this requires hardware upgrades, physical links, special considerations for the channels that you're communicating over, and protected repeaters currently where you have physically secured hops, because there's distance limitations for that communication methodology. So it's very much emerging. It's being tested and validated in financial services. Mainly, there's been some networks and production examples of it being used, but it is not quite yet at the scale that we need in order to protect ourselves from this looming threat in the immediacy. So crypto agility, again, is kind of this idea of underpinning all of these, where we have to have new processes and frameworks for monitoring not just the keys that we're issuing, but also the algorithms that we're selecting in a more agile fashion. So to tie these together, what algorithms has NIST come out with? Well, they came out with the first set of algorithm, or the first type of algorithms called key encapsulation algorithms, and they protect against this on-the-fly individual communications that we're concerned about being harvested now and decrypted later. And then the second type of algorithms they came out with are the digital signature algorithms. And these are the algorithms that we use for sophisticated chains of trust from root authorities that we issue for identity to individuals or to assets, that are typically established over many years and have cycles where you migrate these in and out and update and exchange them, and they have expiration cycles as well, in order to maintain consistency across different environments. So those are the two types of algorithms that we're looking at, and what they protect against. And so we have an analogy to make this a little bit more friendly. If you think of a safe as an object that has steel walls, a lock, and a label, then you can think of the steel walls as symmetric cryptography, which is strong and unbroken and remains something that we'll continue to use. However, the lock and the label are now vulnerable to these quantum attacks of being degraded and broken by quantum computers in the future. So what we currently use here, elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman, typically for the lock, and RSA algorithms for the label, for the identity of the safe, those need to be upgraded to, it says Kyber and dilithium here, but this is essentially the new algorithms, module lattice chem and module lattice digital signature algorithms. So we're changing these locks and labels on everything so that we could be secured against people breaking into our safes or pretending to be sending us information that they're not. So, again, this is just kind of a walkthrough, an example. I'll just go through this quickly of if they could pick the lock. They can't pick the lock today, but if they capture your safe, they can pick the lock in 5 to 10 to 30 years. Then whatever's inside, they'll know that information. So we're changing the locks out so that they can be protected for a much longer period of time. We suspect that we'll have to change the locks out again at some point as well, and that's why we need crypto agility.
So there's a question in the chat.
Oh, sure.
Um, the question is, when do organizations need to migrate existing crypto systems to post-quantum cryptographic methods? And I had a similar question, but I'll let you answer this one first, and then I'll pose mine.
Sure. Yeah. So uh, for this method, for these key encapsulation mechanisms, the answer is today. Your information is at risk today. It could be sent over channels. It can be stolen today, and people can sit on it for a certain amount of time and then be able to break into it. And so any information that's being transmitted outside of your trusted network where you have physical control over each endpoint and know the wire can't be tampered with or tapped into or obstructed, or even in a facility where you have Wi-Fi usage and people could sit outside and collect packets on your Wi-Fi system, or you're transmitting over open air, those are potentially vulnerable. And so we know right now, or just recently, there's been attacks on all of our telecommunication systems, and backdoors available in that. And so that leads to information leakage through those channels. And you're expecting through your telecommunication provider, you've put encryption on either end of your communication. Therefore, it should be fine as it's transmitted through the normal internet or through the providers. However, if you're using that same channel to first exchange your key and decide on a key for that session in band, then if they capture that key exchange and then capture the data that you transmit afterwards, they ultimately have captured the keys to this safe and then can open the safe eventually. And so, we don't know everywhere that is being impacted right now by harvest now, decrypt later, but the attacks that are occurring and the attack vectors are pretty well known, and only time will tell what we've already lost.
Okay, so just making sure we're understanding, and sorry, the post-quantum technology, encryption technology exists today, or the processes, the cryptographic methods exist today that for organizations to begin to employ, even though standard quantum technology is not in place.
Correct.
Is that the right takeaway?
So there
how
are,
do they know? I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. How do you know if you go down that path and you implement the technology today, that it will be compatible when post-quantum technology is operational in a couple of years?
so I'll try to explain. So there is the way that we do communications over the internet today is with a protocol called TLS.
Right.
And TLS uses algorithms it selects algorithms based on the client and the server and negotiates a way to communicate with one another. And so within TLS, we have new algorithms that they don't use quantum computers at all. They just use regular computers that we want to replace, that will protect us against quantum computers that can break the current algorithms that we're using in TLS. So they run on our existing infrastructure, on our existing systems, and they're drop-in replacements for what we currently use today for communications. And they don't use a quantum computer at all. They don't use any quantum physics or entanglement or superposition or anything like that. They just use classical mathematical methods that have been believed to be not weak against the ways quantum computers do data processing.
Okay, understood.
Okay, and so that's why that's what people are moving towards. And then there's other methods that we talked about here. that use quantum physics in order to protect information. And that requires new hardware and essentially a quantum internet of everyone upgrading a lot of different things in order for that to function at scale.
Okay, and that part is not available yet. Is that the takeaway?
Yeah, you have to go out of your way to
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 find
get
it.
it. Whereas what I'm gonna get to here in a minute is you're actually already using post-quantum cryptographic methods. This Zoom call is using the new methods, for example. So let's just keep going. So this was the part one where we're talking about the key encapsulation mechanisms. So there's another process that we need to consider for the digital signatures. So the digital signatures are things that we issue, we manage, it costs money to get a new digital signature minted, and then it takes processes and time to deploy it. And then it has to be revoked or retired or refreshed after a certain amount of time, so it will expire. And right now we know that we have time to replace all of these. We say 2030 here, maybe you're targeting 2029 or 2028 to be conservative, that you want to remint all of your certificates so that no one's identity or no system's identity can be spoofed. And so you'll start to issue those and go through a refresh rate of all your digital certificates over time. The infrastructure for doing this is still being worked out. Like we haven't decided, we know the algorithm to use, but we haven't decided, are we going to put all of these algorithms into one new digital certificate that will have the old one and the new one and let the system decide what to read out of that certificate? Or do we have a different model where you have two different certificate chains of trust and the system has to use one or the other and you have to give it an optionality? And there are performance considerations for each of those. There's the size of the certificate that has to be considered. There's legacy systems that these certificates require more processing power and more memory that have to be taken into account before you can decide to move to potentially using one of these new certificates. And so there's a lot to be done here. And this part you can't necessarily do at scale today. You can get some of the certificate authorities to mint you example certificates, but the standards haven't been codified as to how we're going to do this across the internet. So it's something that people need to be aware of, be monitoring, and understand what's coming next, when it's going to be out, and working with your PKI vendors to be prepared.